Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We do have a few people still coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kelly Whitlock Burton. I'm the chair of the Lincoln County Dems. It's great to see so many people here in the room tonight, and we also have 28 people joining us on Zoom. A few months ago, we had at one of our meetings a group of librarians from schools across the state who came and talked with us about the increase in book bans that is happening here in Maine and across the country. Those book bans that are happening here are not happening in a vacuum. They are part of a national coordinated effort led by a number of organizations that are funded by dark money. These organizations seem benign on the surface. Many of them are led by mothers who say that their involvement is only because they're trying to ensure their kids have a good education and trying to protect their children. But if you peel back the cover, as our guest tonight has done, you'll find that these organizations are funded by some of the same individuals and groups that essentially gutted the Voting Rights Act and those that funded the rally that led to the January 6th insurrection. This is not a benign effort by any stretch of the imagination. But the good news is we have the ability to defeat them at the polls. Last week, on November 7th, there were hundreds of candidates backed by Moms for Liberty, which is one of these groups, across the country. They suffered huge defeats. We had 4 Moms for Liberty candidates here in Maine. 3 of them lost, 1 of them won in Sabatis. So clearly we do have some work to do, but luckily our guest here tonight is going to be able to help us figure out how we do this. Maurice Cunningham, who goes by Mo, is the author of Dark Money and Politics of School Privatization. He's a former associate professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. He has continued his research since he retired into dark money and politics, and he's written 2 white papers for leading national education associations on how to defend our democracy, how to defend our school boards against these kinds of candidates. Mo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. This is great. The plan is we'll on them remotely. Here we are. The plan is being carried out. We're going to put some things on the screen, and the folks at home can see them. And welcome everybody from Zoom. So I'm just going to do a little plug at the beginning. That's my book, Dark Money and the Politics of School Privatization, came out in 2021. And a little different, but at Coastal Senior College this winter, I'm teaching a course called Abraham Lincoln's Words for Our Times. So if anybody can sign up for that, it will be, this is my a sort of a version of my favorite course to teach back in my college days. I could keep going on and not get to my topic, but I'll tell you that when he was 29 years old, Lincoln gave a speech called the Perpetuation Speech, in which he pretty much predicted the rise of Donald Trump. So hopefully that will entice you in. But we'll go ahead with really what's actually scheduled today. Autumn, if you could go to the next one. So, we could spend again all day doing IRS explanations of what dark money is, but for our purposes, it's vast sums put in to politics through campaign finance, through political organizations. And most of my work is on money that goes into nonprofits. Moms for Liberty is a nonprofit, for example. Parents Defending Education and the other operations we talk about are nonprofits. So this is a way to get huge sums of money into the policy game. Guy on the left, you'll recognize perhaps that's Charles Koch. The Koch network is involved in this. That's the symbol on the other side for the Council for National Policy. Probably not as well known, certainly not as well known as Koch. But the Council for National Policy is sort of a right-wing clearinghouse of major organizations in extremist politics. Heritage Foundation, Leadership Institute, a lot of Koch funding and so forth. And a lot of billionaire oil and gas money, communications networks by evangelical Christians in radio and television, and more mass member organizations like the NRA and so forth. Really important umbrella organization on the right. So we're going to come back to both of these networks as we move on. So here are some, not all anti-government extremist groups in Maine. I just use the education ones. But Most of them are designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as extremist groups. So you have Moms for Liberty, and I understand Parents' Rights Maine is now working with Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty has a chapter now in Kennebec County, relatively new one. Parents Defending Education and No Left Turn in Education, national groups, and two groups here in Maine, Parents Involved in Education and Parents' Rights in Education, all kind of plowing the same kind of ground. So they're all around here in Maine, all right? And we'll go to the next if we can. Here we are. I just threw this in today because I was writing about it. This is the latest little controversy from Moms for Liberty, posing with the Proud Boys and flashing the white power sign. This is, I mean, this sort of, what can I say? This kind of says it all about Moms for Liberty, to be honest with you. But again, I could say more, but we can't just spend all our time on that one either. But this is a Make America Sane Again. They're with Proud Boys. I mean, it's just, that's them anyway. This is a report in the Space Coast rocket down in Florida from November 13th. This just happened. This is a big controversy in the last few days. This is not like out of nowhere. They've been associating with the Proud Boys all along. So anyway, on we go. Something to keep in mind, you know, I'm going to talk all about school boards, but the Koch network and the Council for National Policy, they are really in it for the long haul. Koch has been at it for decades, spending the money that he has for a long, 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 long time. So when you think school board races, think about candidates who are then going to move on maybe to the state legislature, okay? And then on to Congress. So we have to be aware that this is not an isolated thing. This is really meant to develop candidates who can then move on from school board on up the ladder to the state house here in Augusta and then on to Congress and so forth. So this is really what they're doing. It is a national effort, and we need to be aware of that it's not just school boards. So we can go on from there. Okay. So what I'll talk a little bit now here from, we'll change pace a little bit. This is the tale of two headlines. This is really the meat of what I want to talk. So here's the Washington Post in June 2023. I think it's June 30th. Moms for Liberty had their national summit in Philadelphia. Okay. Here's the Washington Post headline. Moms for Liberty didn't exist 3 years ago. Now it's a GOP kingmaker. All right. And there's a headline from Newsweek just after the elections last week. Moms for Liberty annihilated in school board elections. How do you explain those two headlines? What happened here? You know? Well, let's go on and we'll try and find out a little bit more about this. The first thing to understand that Moms for Liberty is a media company. It is very tied in. We'll get into this with an operation called the Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute trains conservatives in communications and political technology. And so they told the New Yorker, we're really a media company. And that's really key to understanding Moms for Liberty. And there's more to understand. Let's go on to the next. As a media company, they came out of the box. So they incorporated on January 1, 2021. By the end of that month, the co-founder of the operation, a woman named Tina Descovich, was on Rush Limbaugh's program. Not easy to do. Rush Limbaugh's program. And then this was in a report by Media Matters for America in July 2022. They were on Limbaugh, and then they were in Breitbart, the Daily Signal, the Daily Caller, the Washington Examiner, and of course, the kingmaker itself, Fox News. Between their appearance on Limbaugh and when this piece was written by Media Matters in America in July, they'd been on Fox News 16 times. Okay, so they're getting huge signal boosting out of the right-wing media. Again, this is an organization. I love creation stories. I follow a lot of these kind of organizations. They all have the same creation story. Two moms see something going on, or three moms, and they get together over coffee or the library conference room, and they discover, oh, there's something going on in the schools. Why don't we really try and do something to improve our schools? And we'll form a little organization to do it. And bam, the next thing you know, they're sitting on $1 million. Oh, funny how that happens. You ever hold a meeting over coffee and then somebody pours $1 million? Oh, that's pretty good. So, and gets you on Rush. And, you know, shout outs on Tucker Carlson and so forth. So we'll go on to the next one, because it's not just right-wing propaganda media that does this. Here's a photo that ran in this is my favorite. This is a photo that ran in the Washington Post in October 2021. So Moms for Liberty is about 10 months old at this point. Here's co-founder Tina Deskovich. This is a photo that runs in the Washington Post. Look at her. This is, I mean, how does it get past any editor of a credible newspaper? Here she is, you know, doing what I call the Superman pose and coming out of the phone booth, right? She's revealing that she's got a T-shirt with the marketing symbol on there, and to the left she's got she's got the American flag, and then she's bathed in a halo of light. How can anybody run this kind of photo? Why would anybody pose like that? I don't understand at all how you could do a pose of that nature at all and get away with it. But this is, I mean, it's funny, but this is the Washington Post, for heaven's sakes, you know? So really, I mean, in a lot of ways, and I could have used the Times here, I could use Political, I could use almost anybody. And there's some critical pieces written, but the way major media has boosted this group is really, it's kind of amazing. Okay, but this is also their strength. Like I said, they're a media company. Okay, on to the next. So we've all played this game, especially with kids, right? Okay, one of these is not like the others. Okay. All right. And you probably guessed it. The one that isn't like the other is the elderly gentleman who's been around so long, he was a Goldwater delegate in 1964. You may not have heard of him. Maybe some of you have. He's a man named Morton Blackwell. He is one of the most important political activists of the last 60 years. He started, he is, in 1979, he founded an operation called the Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute trains conservative activists in hardball politics. He's trained Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence. Speaker Johnson has credited Blackwell for getting him his seat in Congress. Okay, he's that important a figure. So there's Blackwell. To the left is Tiffany Justice. She's another co-founder. Tina Deskovich, and off to the right is a woman named Marie Rogerson, who is also on the board of Moms for Liberty, and Rogerson is also was trained by Leadership Institute, as was Deskovich. So it's all kind of tied in. That's them. That's the National Summit. They're giving her they're giving Morton Blackwell the Liberty Sword, it's called. I have a funnier picture than that where it looks like Deskovich is attacking him with the sword, but I couldn't use it today. Anyway, we'll go ahead then. So Blackwell founded this Leadership Institute, 25,000 activists or so he's trained, he claims, over the years. He's also the co-founder of this Council for National Policy. Like I said, it's an umbrella group. Two of the leading members of it, I mean, Blackwell's a member of it. He's been a board member and he's a co-founder. And the Leadership Institute plays a big role in it. And the Heritage Foundation plays a big role in it. The Heritage Foundation is a think tank, right-wing think tank for over 40 years. It too is a member of Council for National Policy. And Heritage and Leadership are the two biggest sponsors of Moms for Liberty. They put more money into Moms for Liberty's National Summit than anybody else. Moms for Liberty is in a partnership with Leadership Institute to do campaign trainings for school board candidates. Heritage, whenever Moms for Liberty gets in its frequent controversies like the one I showed you a few minutes ago, Heritage comes running out with a position paper defending them and so forth. It's really important, but it's crucial to understand that this is all tied in. This is top down. It's centrally driven by folks who've been doing it for a long, long time. They're really good at it. Blackwell's good at it. Okay, on to the next one. Oh, this is also, we're back to the Council for National Policy symbol. I'm sorry, you probably can't read all the print, but in 2017, when Betsy DeVos was coming in to be Secretary of Education in the new Trump administration, the Council for National Policy sent the incoming Trump administration a memorandum saying, in summary, which I put up here, we should be working to eventually abolish all public education and replace it with free market private schools, church schools, and homeschools. as the normative American practice. That's what Council for National Policy is advocating for. That's what Heritage is advocating for. Okay. Who needs an informed electorate? Well, yeah, they don't exactly. So this is really what it's about. It's about ending public education and replacing it with private education. When he says free market, he means for-profit schools, homeschooling and Christian schooling is what they mean. Okay, so that's where we're going with these groups. We can go on to the next. We're going to turn to money a little bit here. I mentioned the Koch network earlier, and I've just put up for these two organizations, both of which are active in Maine: No Left Turn in Education, Parents Defending Education. Their funders are Snyder Foundation. Donor Trust is sort of a, again, we're not going to get into explaining tax law and all that. Donors Trust is a way for people like Koch to give in anonymously, and then it's dispersed to their favorite organization. So Donors Trust is part of the Koch network. Snyder Foundation is part of the Koch network. Searle Freedom Trust is part of the Koch network. So when you see these organizations, you know, which claim to be, I mean, Nicole Neely, who's been working for Koch for about 15 years, actually, she's the head of Parents Defending Education. She said, we're just moms working from home, she told the newspaper. I mean, but this is what it really is. It's the Koch network, okay? On to the next slide, because there's less we can say for sure about Moms for Liberty's funding because of tax reasons and because it's relatively newer. But we do know that this woman is a woman. She's a woman named Julie Fincelli. Her professional line of work is heiress. Tough work if you can get it. She's an heiress to the public's fortune. She, in 2022, she gave $50,000 to the Moms for Liberty super PAC in Florida for their school board candidates. In 2022, she gave $100,000 to the Moms for Liberty Foundation. Okay, so she's a major giver, and she's a major giver to the January 6th rally, the Stop the Steal rally. $3 million. In fact, more than $3 million to support that rally, working with Alex Jones and other folks like that. So that's the kind of backing that we're getting for Moms for Liberty. Okay. So we'll move on from Julie. Here we are. We're back at the election. So what happened? Why, you know, with all this going for them and all, and you know, even, you know, they were involved in school board races in 22 and earlier in 23. And to read press accounts, they were doing just great. But then you start diving into it more and more and more, and you say, they're not doing that well, really. Independent accounts are not linking up to what they're saying they're doing. So I had a suspicion that they really weren't going to do as well as they were projecting that they do, and that's what happened on election day. So let's go on, and we'll see some of the kind of messaging that's been working against them, which is really what we want to get at, because we're going to be facing them for a number of years, and we're going to beat them. And this is a mix of some things that happened leading up to election days, some messages that candidates were using, and some techniques, and a lot of research that's gone into this recently too, because as I'll show you at the end, there are groups that have formed to counter the privatization groups that exist, like Moms for Liberty, and they've done a lot. They've put a lot of resources into this too, and so we'll talk about some of that. The most important thing: don't accept their frames. Don't ever say parents' rights. This has nothing whatsoever to do with parents' rights. Okay, so this is an extremist organization, anti-government extremist organization, so designated by this very credible Southern Poverty Law Center, and that drives them crazy. They hate it. They hate it when you point out that they've been designated a hate group, basically. So talk our frame, not their frame, and talk about what we want for schools: good, high-achieving schools that honor all kids. Okay, that let students be themselves, discover, use their imagination, and develop their friendships and their total self. Okay, that's what we want out of the schools. Okay, repeated all the time, and this is very successful with them. We want to support public schools. 85% of students in this country go to public schools, not vouchers, not charter schools, public schools. Some of the campaigns, people have made great cases that schools are really important to community. This has turned out to be a great message in the suburbs, by the way. Control is really important. I'll see a slide on that for the next one too, so we can go. So this has been a research item, and it really worked in the elections, was the control they want over what people read, what people think, what people can say, who they can play with, what they think. And this whole issue of them trying to gain control over, not freeing people, but actually gaining control over what we teach in our schools and who you can be in our schools and what you can talk about in our schools and how you can identify in our schools, okay? It's been very successful to pound that home, okay, against them. And never hurts to mention who funds them. We'll go on to the next one, a few more lessons. There are a lot of people out there who are feeling intimidated by this, and reaching out to them is important. You don't really, we're Democrats in the hall. Don't be Democrats out there talk about public education. That's what's really important. That's been resonating. Allies you can find. Unions are critically important. The teachers' unions and others. Librarians, students. Students don't want to put up with this BS. They want a real education. They've been, in a lot of places, they've just been terrific. Students in Florida have really been fantastic. So, they're standing up for themselves. Real parents, the LGBTQ community is really important because these folks target LGBTQ folks. I'm talking later in the month to a group of elders in Syracuse. They don't have kids in the schools. Maybe some of them have grandkids in schools, but it's an LGBTQ group. They can see what's coming at them. So we're going to talk to them about it. Faith groups, nonprofits, and so forth. They just hate bad publicity, so don't be afraid to give them some. Talk a little bit more of that too. They really go into hiding. They just churtle up. Anybody try and join one of their Facebook groups or anything? It's very hard to get in. It's administered down in Florida and so forth usually, but they don't. But every once in a while, people send me stuff, and it's like complaining about all you leftists and Marxists who say mean things about them, so they can't go out of the house. Who cares? Make sure to thank teachers, school board members. You can't, the heat that these people get is just awful. Some of these school board meetings around the country, I don't know how much of it has happened up here. Well, I do know because I was at, the meeting with the librarians that was mentioned, and there were the librarians in this state who asking for school resource officers to walk them to their cars because they're so afraid. Because the reaction has been, they've fomented this wild craziness. So really support all these folks. And we'll go on. I think, let me see what I get next here. The control narrative. These are from races, Washington Post kind of turned around. These are from races in Virginia, where the Democrats held the House and took the Senate, I think. Or maybe I have that opposite. One of the candidates ran against the Republican who filed the book banning bill. He went around and said, I'm a teacher. I know what one book can mean to a student. One book, right, can mean to that student. He beat the person who wrote that legislation. Book banning hits on just cheap attacks on schools and this, again, control into people's lives, preventing kids from having the imagination that they really deserve to have in life and discover themselves. So it's very successful there. On to the next. And it is, here we are. Not all publicity is good. They hate this. So I mentioned the Southern Poverty Law Center. They were, one of the things I like to look for in politics is when the other side is squealing like crazy. Well, they were squealing right away because the SPLC is a very well-known and highly respected organization. And when they put them on their list for extremism in 2022, it had a really big impact on Moms for Liberty. And they've been fighting about it ever since. But also, PEN America has them on the most important group in book banning, according to PEN America, is Moms for Liberty. And the Human Rights Campaign, for the first time in this country, called a state of emergency for LGBTQ plus individuals in this country. And in doing that, they named Moms for Liberty as going around and testifying in states for anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. And so all of these things are very, very important. Let me go to the next one. Milwaukee, I bet Milwaukee's up if I remember. Well, they did not have a nice time in Milwaukee. They went to Milwaukee because the Republican candidates were going to have a presidential debate. And Moms for Liberty said, we're going to go to Milwaukee and we're going to have a town hall with 5 candidates. I mean, really, if you remember that Kingmaker headline, I mean, that's like, wow, oh, 5 candidates, sure. All right. Well, except the Milwaukee Educators Association and others began protesting and saying to the hall that was going to have this, hey, you know, you're having an SPLC hate group there? Maybe you shouldn't do that. Well, the hall pulled out. And then the 5 candidates pulled out. And then it became just Tiffany Justice in conversation with Senator Ron Johnson, except they wouldn't tell you where they're going to hold the conversation because they were afraid people would show up and protest. So in order to hold the thing with Ron Johnson, they had some hidden site. And if you wanted to go to it, you had to call the PR firm that represents Moms for Liberty. And I don't know, promise you wouldn't, you know, say anything mean to them or something, I guess. And then Leadership Institute, working with Moms for Liberty, said, we're going to have a big training. And we're going to have all these people come. We're going to train them how to be school board candidates. The training head for Leadership Institute, by the way, is a woman named Bridget Ziegler. She's a Florida school board member. Her husband, Christian Ziegler, is the chairman of the Florida Republican Party and a paid consultant to Moms for Liberty, right? And Bridget's another one who's had her picture taken with the Proud Boys flashing the signs. So this is what we're dealing with. But anyways, Blackwell hires her for the Leadership Institute. She says, we got to move to a bigger hall. We're going to have 80 people, 100 people are going to show up. We need a bigger hall. They held the training, 12 people showed up. There were more protesters outside, right? And as I said, they have to go into hiding with this, okay? So they can cause enormous amounts of trouble. I don't want to downgrade it. Some of the places they've been, I mean, it's just appalling the things they've done. And they do team up with the Proud Boys. I mean, this is not easy stuff. But on the other hand, you know, they're very sensitive to this kind of thing, and they're really a bad group, but we can beat them doing this kind of thing. All right, away from Milwaukee. A couple of groups. I just want to, you don't have to reinvent the wheel with this stuff. There are some, all across the country, there are groups forming against Moms for Liberty, a couple of national ones. This is Suburban Women, Red, Wine, and Blue, and they're really good. The Parent Playbook, a step-by-step guide for mainstream moms who've had enough BS. Don't kid around. And then there's the Troublemaker's Guide to Getting Shit Done. I like that one. So, but these things are practical guides for how to take on Moms for Liberty and other kind of similar groups. So on to the next one, which is, I know it's the last slide, which I hope you'll have questions if I'm tired of listening to myself. This is another one, Defensive Democracy. Just, I forget when they started. It might have been in upstate New York or somewhere. Just a group of folks who got together and said, this is what's going on in our community schools is terrible. We have to do something. And they did. They formed Defensive Democracy. They've gone nationwide too. But everywhere there's grandparents groups in Florida. There's groups all around the place. Huge wins on election day. There's kind of the poster board, school board for right-wing politics is in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, with Moms for Liberty majority. They wiped the Moms for Liberties right off the board, took them right out, okay? I mentioned Virginia. Moms for Liberty lost and I mean, not just lost, got wiped out in Iowa and Ohio, across the board. In Minnesota, they lost. It was a real beating, you know. The Newsweek isn't what it used to be, but when they wrote the headline that said Moms for Liberty was annihilated on election day, they were annihilated on election day. That's good news. But like I said, these folks are long-term interests. They don't go away, and we have to be there ready to take them on. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Do you want to have a seat? We're going to take questions
Comfortable seat.
from here in the room, but also from Zoom.
Great. Thanks, Mo. This is like way more encouraging than I expected. However, there's a risk that we could walk away from this feeling not necessarily complacent, but more comfortable than we should. As you pointed out, these people play the long game. Can you give us maybe 2 ideas of things that we can do right here, right now to push back?
I think exposure is very important. I think, that one school board candidate that won for them, that person deserves a lot of attention. They don't make it easy for people, and we should not be making it easy for them. They have, when Deskovich got beat for his school board seat by a woman named Jennifer Jenkins, I met her at a conference a couple of weeks ago. Jenkins then began, the Moms for Liberty began showing up at school board meetings. She began to get followed. There was a cross burned into her lawn. Someone anonymously reported her for child abuse, so she had the Department of Children and Families come to interview her kid, and she had to go to that school. There were people with guns in the neighborhood. This is Florida, after all. Who doesn't have guns? But brandishing guns in the neighborhood. There were protests at her house. All kinds of critics. So you can't. I mean, we'll behave a lot more honorably than they'll ever behave. I understand that we're going to behave honorably, but within the boundaries of decency and a kind of politics and values we want to represent, don't let them have a moment. Really, don't let them have a moment, I think. And I also, in that regard, reach out to others, find allies. It's really important to find allies and let people who are taking the heat. We haven't had that much in Maine yet, but you see it happening elsewhere, like Jennifer Jenkins in Florida. Let them know you got their back. All right. If people are showing up at protests, if people are showing up at school board meetings and hogging the microphone, make sure we have people at school board meetings. All right. That's a very practical step that can be done. And we should be doing those kind of things and looking out for the opportunities to do them. Yeah. But they spread, they open new chapters all the time. There's a lawsuit going on regarding to, I don't know the details, a transgender child in, I think the high school, and that's being brought by the Goldwater Institute. Well, who funds the Goldwater Institute? Koch, DeVos. Yeah, is that a great Salt Bay?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
it's
so,
Koch, it's DeVos, it's other groups like that. Good.
Good.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the question, prior to Mom's, prior to this, these recent groups that have sprung up, the CMP and the Heritage Foundation, the Leadership Institute, been around for a long time.
Yeah.
The DeVos family was
Yeah.
deeply ingrained in CMP, I believe.
Yeah.
And, when Trump took the presidency, he brought Betsy DeVos in as Secretary of Education. What kind of damage did she do? I mean, presumably she was there to dismantle public schools. This whole agenda has been part of CMP for a long time. So what did they do?
I'm not an education expert so much as I'm a dark money expert. So I don't want to go overboard with it. My friends so I'm not an education expert. She did promote a lot of the stuff she tried to do was stopped. But I mean, you can do with that kind of money, you can do a lot of harm more outside than on the inside, because a lot of the things, my understanding is a lot of things she did try got flustered on the inside, stopped.
Well, I'm curious about the people behind the organizations. You talked about moms getting together in the library.
Yeah.
So do they obtain fundraising and then they hire professional staff? Are they profiting with huge salaries, or are they lost as they develop into?
David, it's a very top-down driven thing. Yeah, I mean, the people you see screaming at the meetings are real. I mean, one of the things they understand in American politics is and as soon as they came on the scene, I said, oh, this is white backlash politics. It was different than the privatization schemes I'd been looking at over the years. As soon as they came, Parents for Defending Education, this group, as soon as you could see it was white backlash politics. It was anti-LGBTQ, particularly transgender kids attacks. And unfortunately, in this country, you can rile up people on those issues pretty predictably. This has happened over and over again in our history. So people screaming are local, but the operations from above, I mean, the messaging it's out of Manhattan Institute, it's out of Heritage, it is very heavily tested and polled. The whole CRT thing. I mean, the guy who promotes CRT, anti-CRT stuff is a guy named Chris Rufo, Manhattan Institute. And he'll just go out to the press and say, yeah, we're gonna use this CRT thing so that anything anybody says anything about race is going to seem like you're attacking America, and we'll win on this issue. We'll redefine it in the way we want to, and it's worked, you know. So you can get the crazies going like that, but this is very much from the top down driven.
So they're not seeking out Coke. Coke is seeking out them.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you.
So the major fundraising people like the white men that you say behind it, they're seeking out organizations like this as opposed for the organizations looking for funding.
Yeah, they've created the organizations. Moms for Liberty is, I have a friend, Ann Nelson, who wrote a great book about Council for National Policy. Ann would say they are obedient franchises. That's what Moms for Liberty is. It's an obedient franchise. You know, it's not two moms that got together over the kitchen table. No, it's not. Yeah. It was three moms, and one of them had to be married to the chair of the Florida Republican Party. Oh, what luck.
Okay, good. Thank you. Recently, RSU 40, which is the school district, public school district for 5 rural towns in the Mid-Coast, voted down an $81 million school improvement facilities, bond. This area can't get access to public funding, so they went to the municipal bond bank to borrow $80 million. That's a lot of money. And all the select boards of each of the 5 towns, rural towns, said, no, it's going to, increase our tax base. Of course, they have their competing interests to buy things like ambulances and so forth, which are legitimate. So my thought here is the argument was that there was no discussion about K through 12 and the value of investing in school facilities to promote education and aspirations and performance of youth. And there's been a lot of studies nationally that good facilities create, better environments for kids to grow up and be nurtured. So I do think the ideological divide is behind this, by the way, and book banning is, not far behind the whole thing. So I guess my question is, this may be not the right forum to ask it, but do you have, a sense of what's going on nationally around public education to safeguard it and to invest in it and to support it and to deal with, this, what seems to be happening, especially in the rural areas where there's also low incomes? Thank you.
I can only speak to it very broadly because I'm not a municipal finance person. You're right. That's 80 million is a lot of money, and those are difficult conversations to have. But the way you then went on and talked about it is exactly the way to frame it, which is this is to help kids learn. This is to have better facilities so people can learn and grow and in a modern world. So I think it's the right way to talk about it. But I will say, you asked nationally, around the country, there have been gains. I mean, Betsy DeVos and allies of hers have in Arizona and Nebraska and in many other states have elected very conservative state legislatures. I mean, they're very happy to get rid of a Republican if that Republican isn't voting for school vouchers. And so in a number of states, Florida, and I mean, basically very red states, there's been a lot of reverses in the last year. There have been voucher programs, charter programs. In Oklahoma, we have our first ever chartered religious school. Okay, I think that's being contested, but the Oklahoma school superintendent is a Christian nationalist. He wants the Bible in the schools and so forth. So in a lot of other places, it's not going so well. And you won't see those kind of investments. And, I got into this writing a book called the book Dark Money in the Politics of School Privatization. It's about neoliberal reformers, not these crazy, these right-wing white backlash folks, but neoliberal reformers funded by Gates, Walton, the Broad Foundation, and others who are all in favor of charter schools. Well, at the bottom of that for many of these folks is we don't want to pay taxes for your kids to go to school. That's what it's about. So let's offload it to charters, let's offload it to vouchers and so forth. Let's take money out of public systems and put them into these other systems. And that's what it's about. I learned a whole lot about how these folks operated by studying the neoliberal organizations. Don't get me started on something called Democrats for Education Reform, because I will go on all day long. There's about, they get to use the plural because I think there's about 7 or 8 of them. I'll tell you one thing about Democrats for Education Reform, only one, and then I'll cut myself off or I'll keep going. Famous Democrat Rupert Murdoch put $1 million into them.
And on that note, Mo, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks
Let's
for
give
having
him a
me.
round of applause.